On the morning of June 4th, 1942, one of the most powerful carrier forces on Earth was sailing toward what it believed would be a trap for the United States Navy. Instead, it was sailing into its own destruction. And the strangest part is this. The disaster did not begin with a bomb. It began with a decision made under pressure, with incomplete information, in a sky full of enemy aircraft. A decision that seemed logical in the moment, but would help turn 4 Japanese aircraft carriers into burning wrecks. This is the Battle of Midway, but not as a simple story of luck. This is a step-by-step breakdown of one of the deadliest air combat mistakes ever made. To understand the mistake, you have to understand Japan's plan. After Pearl Harbor, Japan had dominated the Pacific. Its carrier force had shocked the world. Its pilots were highly trained, and its commanders believed that if they could lure the remaining American carriers into one decisive battle, they could crush them and force the United States onto the defensive. The bait was Midway, a tiny atoll in the Pacific. Japan would attack it, threaten it, and wait for the American fleet to come rushing in. But the first problem was invisible. American codebreakers had already figured out that Midway was the target. So while Japan believed it was setting the ambush, the United States was preparing one of its own. The American carriers Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown were already waiting in the area, positioned to strike when the Japanese appeared. Early that morning, Vice Admiral Chuchi Nagumo launched his first wave of aircraft against Midway. This was step 1 of the disaster. His planes hit the island, but they did not destroy it. Midway's runways, defenses, and aircraft were still a threat. Then came the message Nagumo did not want to hear. A second strike against Midway was needed. At that exact moment, Nagumo had reserve aircraft waiting on his carriers. Many of them were armed with torpedoes, ready to attack ships if American vessels were discovered. But the first wave had reported that Midway was not neutralized, so Nagumo made a decision that history would remember. He ordered those reserve aircraft to be rearmed for another land attack. That sounds reasonable. If Midway is still a threat, hit Midway again. But on an aircraft carrier, changing weapons is not like swapping tools in a garage. It means moving bombs and torpedoes through crowded hangar spaces. It means handling fuel, explosives, aircraft, elevators, crews, and flight decks while fighters are taking off and landing. It takes time. It creates confusion. And in a carrier battle, time is everything. Then, just as the rearming process was underway, the situation changed again. A Japanese scout plane reported American ships. At first, the report was vague. It did not clearly say carriers had been found. That delay mattered. Nagumo now faced a nightmare scenario every carrier commander feared. His planes were being changed for a land attack at the very moment enemy ships might be nearby. So he reversed the process. The aircraft now had to be prepared again for an attack on ships. Torpedoes and armor-piercing bombs had come back into the picture. The hangars became a bottleneck of half-finished work. Planes that should have been ready to launch were not ready. Weapons that should have been secured were being moved. Crews were racing against the clock. But Nagumo still had another problem. The first attack wave was returning from Midway. Those aircraft were low on fuel. They needed to land. If he launched his reserve aircraft immediately, he would clog the flight decks and leave the returning pilots with nowhere to go. If he recovered the returning planes first, he would lose precious minutes before striking the American carriers. He chose to recover the planes first, and this is where the trap closed. While Nagumo was trying to reorganize, American aircraft were already coming. The first attacks were chaotic and costly. Torpedo bombers flew in low and slow, often without proper fighter cover. Japanese Zero fighters cut them apart. Entire squadrons were nearly wiped out. From the Japanese perspective, it looked like they were surviving the attack. But those torpedo attacks did something critical. They pulled Japanese fighters down toward the water. They kept the Japanese fleet maneuvering. They forced the carriers to keep reacting. And while the Zeros were low, another threat was arriving high above. American dive bombers found the Japanese carriers at almost a perfect moment. Below them were ships in the middle of the most dangerous possible cycle. Aircraft recovering, aircraft being refueled, weapons being shifted, crews exhausted, commanders overloaded, and combat air patrol out of position. The Japanese carriers were not helpless, but they were vulnerable in exactly the way carriers are most vulnerable, caught between launching, landing, fueling, and arming. Then the dive bombers attacked. In just minutes, the carriers Akagi, Kaga, and Sori were hit. Bombs tore through flight decks. Fires erupted. Fuel ignited. Explosions spread through the hangars. The damage was not just from the bomb hits themselves, but from the chain reaction inside ships packed with aircraft, fuel lines, ammunition, and men trying desperately to control fires that were already moving faster than they could respond. Akagi, Nagumo's flagship, was hit by what may have been a single fatal bomb. But on a carrier at the wrong moment, one bomb can be enough. Kaga was devastated. Sori was left burning. The heart of Japan's carrier striking force had been destroyed almost instantly, and the battle was not over. The fourth Japanese carrier, Hiryu, survived long enough to strike back and badly damage Yorktown. For a moment, it looked like Japan might still land a crushing blow. But later that day, American aircraft found Hiryu too. It was attacked, set ablaze, and eventually lost. By the end of the battle, Japan had lost 4 fleet carriers, hundreds of aircraft, and thousands of men. Even worse, it had lost veteran air crews and carrier specialists that could not be replaced quickly. The Japanese Navy had not simply lost ships. It had lost the core of the force that made its early Pacific victories possible. So was Nagumo's rearming order the only reason Japan lost at Midway? No, that would be too simple. The real disaster was a chain. Japanese intelligence underestimated American readiness. The search plan was flawed. One scout plane was late. Reports were unclear. The Japanese plan was too complex and depended on everything happening perfectly. American codebreakers gave the U.S. Navy the advantage before the first bomb ever fell. And American pilots, especially the torpedo squadrons who suffer horrific losses, created the opening that the dive bombers exploited. But the rearming decision was the moment when all those problems became fatal. It trapped Nagumo between 2 targets, Midway Island and the American carriers. He prepared for one, then the other, then had to recover his returning aircraft, and every step cost time. By the time the American dive bombers arrived, the Japanese carriers were caught in transition, the worst place a carrier can be during battle. That is why this mistake is so deadly. It was not stupid. It was not careless. It was a reasonable decision made inside a collapsing timeline. And that is what makes it terrifying. In war, the worst mistakes are not always obvious in the moment. Sometimes they look like the safest choice available. Midway changed the Pacific War. Before it, Japan was expanding. After it, Japan was forced increasingly onto the defensive. The United States did not win the war in one afternoon, but it gained something priceless: momentum. Japan had planned to destroy the American carriers. Instead, its own carrier force was broken. The lesson is brutal. In air combat, especially carrier warfare, information is life. Timing is life. A few minutes can decide whether your aircraft strike first or burn on their own decks. Nagumo's mistake was not just choosing the wrong weapon. It was being forced to choose before he fully understood the battlefield. And by the time he understood it, the sky above him was already full of American dive bombers. Fuentes Verificadas para la Base Histórica del Guyán, Imperial War Museums, National World War II Museum, Naval History and Heritage Command, Britannica-wide National Museum of the Pacific War,